everyone. Thanks for making it on a Friday evening to hear about this. So we're going to be talking about the extremely polarizing subject of court vacations today. And why is this a polarizing subject? Because I feel like it comes up on and off every time there is a discussion about court vacations, about pendency and the efficiency of courts and, all the problems with courts. And then there are two camps, right? This is the classic divide that characterizes all discussions on court reforms. So just for the sake of provocation, I'll call it the insiders, who will basically take the defense of, court vacations don't really make so much of a difference to pendency and efficiency, or any attack on courts because of court vacations is basically politically motivated. Or, for example, are you doubting the judicial integrity of judges? They work really hard. They just don't have to judge. Their job extends much more beyond the courtroom. They are using their vacation time well. And these are the, and the opposite side argues that, listen, courts are like any other public organization, and if you compare the working calendar of a public organization and a court, you'll find that courts are actually working for a significantly lesser period of time, especially the higher judiciary. So it's a pretty, as you can imagine, a very polarizing topic, and like a lot of people like saying that where you stand on this topic depends on where you sit generally, right? But we are going to try and make this really boring. We are going to ask, where is the data for either of this, right? So if you claim that court vacations actually reduce efficiency, increase pendency, increase case life cycles, where is the data for that? Or if you claim that court vacations actually help productivity, where is the data for that, right? So we actually started off just on this curious trail of, how do we support either of this? How do we find out how do we get closer to the truth, if at all there is a truth to this, right? So what the institutional setting for this is as follows, that the higher judiciary in India, the high courts and the Supreme Court, generally go on 3 vacations, and the average working period is about 235 days to 40 days. I believe Supreme Court vacations are longer, but this is what we have for the Bombay High Court and the Delhi High Court. And it's not like during vacations courts don't work at all. There are vacation benches that do work, but courts work at a significantly reduced capacity, okay? So for example, for the calendar year of 2023, we did a comparison of the strength of the court during vacation and during normal working days, and we find that actually there's a significant drop in the number of courtrooms functioning during vacations versus non-vacations. And this is not just about judges taking vacations. Even the registry works at a much lower strength. It's harder to find lawyers who are willing to appear during the vacation period. So the entire ecosystem around courts is working at a reduced capacity during the vacation period. And the question is that how does this affect the productivity of the court? And whilst, we can argue that productivity at a meta level means very many things, we restrict ourselves to the most visible metrics of productivity when it comes to courts. Number one, the number of cases filed and the number of cases disposed of. Then we go on to say that, okay, this is about overall court productivity, but how does this affect the life of a litigant? And there too, we say that actually we'll just look at the most visible aspects of a litigant's case life cycle, and we take into account how much time does a case take to get its first hearing if it is filed during the vacation period versus if it is filed outside of the vacation period, or do court vacations actually make a difference to the time to disposal depending on whether the case is filed during vacation and outside of vacation. So this is a starting point, but just to be absolutely clear, this does not encompass the whole sort of gamut of productivity that one would really ideally like to take into account when it comes to courts. So what does our data look like? We focus on commercial cases, so mostly commercial suits, summary suits, all of which are filed in the original jurisdiction of these 2 high courts. We are looking at cases which were filed in this 7-year period between 2017 and 2023. That gives us at about 13,000 odd cases, and more than 50% of these cases are pending. So this is what our data set looks like. And just to dive directly into what we find, on the first aspect, right, we ask ourselves that do court vacations actually result in a drop in the number of cases, in the daily number of cases that are filed or the daily number of cases that are disposed of? And no surprises here. We filed that at least for the Bombay High Court, there is a 3x drop in the number of cases that were filed during the vacation period, and a nearly 4x drop in the number of cases that were disposed of during the vacation period. These are daily averages, okay? The drop is much higher for the Delhi High Court. There's a 7x drop in the number of cases filed during the vacation period at the Delhi High Court, and a near 8x drop in the number of cases filed, in the number of cases disposed of by the Delhi High Court during the vacation period. So I suspect, this is rather intuitive. Everybody understands that courts are working at a much lower strength, and therefore nobody's surprised to see this. However, what we find is that if we actually zoom out a little bit, so if we were to just keep these daily averages in mind, then the counterfactual, the corollary of this would be that if there were no vacations, the Bombay High Court would have seen 3x the number of cases being filed and 4x the number of cases being disposed of. And the Delhi High Court would have seen 7x the number of cases being filed and nearly 7x the number of disposals. But we find that these differences don't really translate in as linear a fashion. We zoom out a little bit and we compare these same numbers for the quarters that are affected by the vacation period and quarters that are not affected by the vacation period. Okay, now here the intuition is that actually when we measure performance of firms, etc., we go quarter on quarter, we don't go day by day, simply because it's more meaningful to measure performance over a longer period of time as opposed to looking at daily averages, although daily averages are a good point to begin with. And when we actually zoom out a little bit, we find that actually the differences between the number of cases filed and the number of cases disposed of between vacation affected quarters and non-vacation affected quarters is pretty small, which is that, so just look at the Bombay High Court numbers, okay? Just look at the cases filed in the vacation quarters. We are looking at about 130 cases being filed on an average in the vacation quarters, and it's only slightly higher during the non-vacation quarters, about 18 more cases being filed in the non-vacation quarters. Look at the disposal numbers for the Bombay High Court. About 42 odd cases get disposed of in the vacation quarter, and about 54, 55 odd cases get disposed of in the quarters that are not affected by the vacation. Similarly, for Delhi High Court, the differences are much smaller. So the short point here is that while the daily average number of cases filed and disposed of during vacation and non-vacation period, there is a big difference. These differences kind of peter out over time. A possible explanation is that the court probably makes up, or another possible explanation is that since the court is taking into account only urgent cases during the vacation period, the moment the vacation stops, its speed slows down, and therefore maybe these differences play out. We have to go deeper to understand why these differences disappear if we look at the quarter numbers. Right. Then we say, okay, this is all very good at the level of the productivity of a court, but what does it mean for a litigant? A litigant is not concerned with what is the pendency of the court and what are the filing numbers at a court when he or she files his case. He's concerned about when is he likely to get a disposal, when is he likely to get a first hearing. And here the most common approach used is to use average time to disposal, average time to first hearing. Now, we tried doing that in the beginning, and over time we realized that there is a big mistake when we just take into account average time to disposal and average time to first hearing, because we then ignore all the cases that have not got a disposal or have not got a first hearing. Therefore, we use something known as a survival approach, which allows us to take into account every single case that was filed but has not had a hearing, every single case that was filed but has not yet gotten disposed of, and cases that have got their first hearing and have got their disposal. So it takes into account the full universe of cases that are sitting in the system, and it allows us to estimate the probability of getting a first hearing or a disposal at any given point in time. Basically, the probability of reaching any milestone at any given point in time. Now, what you see on your screen, okay, these are survival curves. I request you to just focus on the first one, which is the Bombay High Court. Okay, this is the probability of getting a first hearing for a case that is filed in the Bombay High Court. The blue line are the cases that are filed during the vacation period. The green line are the cases that are filed during the non-vacation period. We find that they coincide pretty much, and there is not much difference between a case that is filed in the vacation period getting its first hearing and a case that is filed not during the vacation period getting its first hearing. Now, just for some, a quick sort of cognitive hack is that the steeper the curve, the faster the milestone is approaching. All right. Now, look at the Delhi High Court survival graph. We find that there is, again, the green and blue line are coinciding, which means that there's not much difference of a case reaching its first hearing, whether it is filed during the vacation period or outside the vacation period. Also, this curve is damn steep, which means that the first milestone of a first hearing at the Delhi High Court is happening really fast for all kinds of cases, whether filed in the vacation or non-vacation period. So we have to figure out why is there such a big difference between the Bombay and Delhi High Court, and that is not the subject of this particular presentation, but it's another sort of curiosity that's opened up, that why is there such a big difference. But the point is that between the blue and the green lines, there's not much difference. And just to make it absolutely explicitly clear, right, these are the probabilities of a case filed at the Bombay High Court getting a first hearing within the first 1 month, first 3 months, first 6 months. So just focus on the 1 month, okay? If a case is filed during the vacation period, it has about a 6% probability of getting a hearing within the first 1 month. If it is filed outside of the vacation period, it has about a 7% probability of getting its first hearing within the first 1 month. Okay, the differences are not big. By the time you are at 3 months, there is not much difference whether the case was filed in the vacation period or outside the vacation period. The differences peter out as the months pass, because maybe the vacation effect goes away. Maybe the cases that are filed during the vacation period are urgent and therefore it doesn't matter, and they get their first hearing pretty quickly, comparatively quickly as compared to cases that are filed during the non-vacation period. Similarly for Delhi High Court, nearly 99% chance of a case getting its first hearing within the first 1 month, whether it is filed in the vacation period or outside of the vacation period. So now, why are we focusing on this milestone? Why do we care so much? So for those of us who are not familiar with how the litigation cycle works out, is that in a system where disposal is expected to take a very, very long period of time, the first hearing ends up becoming most important, because either you are praying for an ad interim relief or an interim relief, which pretty much decides how much negotiating power will a party end up having after the first hearing, and that's why we focus on this milestone of first hearing. Now, what happens to disposal? Does disposal get delayed if you file a case during the vacation period? And again, we take the survival approach. If we just focus on the left-hand side of the graph, right? The green line is for cases that are filed outside of the vacation period. The blue line are for cases that are filed during the vacation period, and here we see a small difference, right? We see that actually the cases that are filed during the vacation period have a steeper curve, which means that they are reaching there are more chances of such cases getting their disposal sooner compared to cases that are filed outside of the vacation period. Similarly, for the Delhi High Court, cases that are filed during the vacation period actually take a slightly longer time to get disposed of, and these are all probabilities, okay? These are not averages compared to cases that are not filed during the vacation period. Again, just to put it in terms of numbers, we just take the 1-year milestone, and what we find is that a case that is filed during the vacation period has about a 12% chance of getting disposed of at the Bombay High Court within the first year, compared to a case that is filed outside of the vacation period, which has a 17% chance. There is some difference, but it's not too big. Oddly, for cases filed at the Delhi High Court, cases that are filed during the vacation period actually have a higher chance of getting disposal within the first year compared to cases that are not filed during the vacation period. Again, what explains is it the urgent nature of cases? Is it that such cases are getting settled much faster? We don't know. We have to get into more textual analysis of the orders to figure that out. But this is a starting point. Right. So, what was the end point conclusion? Towards the end of this small exercise that we did, we realized that number one, intuitively, right, not surprising, there is a significant drop in the number of cases filed and the number of cases disposed of on a daily basis during the vacation and the non-vacation period. Okay, but this difference, you know, it disappears within time, and if we zoom out on the time window, the difference is negligible. Second, court vacations marginally affect the initial life cycle of a case. So yes, there is a higher chance of a case, there is a marginally higher chance of a case getting its first hearing if it is filed during the outside of the vacation period, but the difference is nearly negligible, and after the first month it disappears, it nearly disappears, and whether you go approach the court during vacation period or outside of the vacation period, the chances are the same that you'll get your first hearing within the first 3 months. And finally, disposal, we see that there is a difference in the Bombay High Court whether a case is filed for cases that are filed during vacation period versus cases that are filed outside of the vacation period. In the Delhi High Court, somehow counterintuitively, the difference runs the other way. That is, cases that are filed during the vacation period actually have a slightly higher chance of a disposal within the first year compared to cases that are filed outside of the vacation period. Okay, the compulsory caveats, this applies only to commercial cases. You know, writ petitions, criminal cases which are more in the nature of cases that are actually seeking urgent relief may behave differently. We don't know that. Secondly, this, like I mentioned, this does not account for a judge's productivity. It only accounts for visible metrics of productivity that are visible to outsiders or to litigants. But it is entirely possible that a judge comes back with boosted productivity after a vacation, ends up writing more judgments. We don't know that. But that is kind of orthogonal to the idea of vacations, because that would happen even if a judge were to take leave individually and not as a vacation, like a collective body of judges going on leave. And finally, yes, we need to do more research on this very unexpected phenomenon of a nearly 99% chance of a case getting a first hearing at the Delhi High Court within the first 1 month compared to the Bombay High Court. So that's something that we want to sort of go into deeply. If any of you all have insights on why this is happening, happy to hear that. And thank you. That's about it.